Hey everyone! So today I'm going to talk about makeup applicators. Have you ever done your makeup and when you were done you really weren't happy with the finished results and you blamed it on the makeup and said, oh, that particular makeup is no good, blah blah blah. Well, chances are it wasn't the makeup, it was the applicator that you used. A lot of times you can buy pretty much any kind of makeup and make it work and have it look good if you use the right tool for the job. What I'm talking about are things like brushes, sponges, any kind of applicator that you use. So today I just want to briefly go over the different applicators that you can use and what they work best with. Alright, let's start with blush. Okay, I have recently purchased the Illamasqua Hussy blush, and this is a powder blush, so you want to use a brush for an applicator. But this is an extremely pigmented blush, and the first time I used it, I look like a clown because I was using the brush that I use for my other powder blushes, and that didn't work out because the brush head on it, which is the e.l.f. Studio powder brush, the brush head is so large that it picked up, a decent amount of blush, even though I was trying to be careful and only put a little bit on there. So now when I use this blush, or any pigmented blush like NARS for example, what I do is I use a small brush head. For example, this brush is by Essence, not to be confused with Essence of Beauty from CVS. This is Essence from Ulta, and this is their version of a blush brush. And because the head on it is so small, it only picks up a small amount of blush, and it makes it easier to not overdo it. Okay, what about cream blushes? Cream blushes work best with your fingers. For example, the new Maybelline Dream Bouncy blushes. I've tried a number of different ways of using these, and in the end, the best thing to use is your fingers, because the warmth of your fingers mixes with the blush and helps it blend, and you have really great control over the place where you're applying it and how well it's blended. You can just keep blending with your fingers until you're done. Now, what about cheek stains or something like that? The best thing to use for those are sponges. And this is what I buy. I just buy a bag of applicator sponges. They look like this. And these are latex-free, multi-purpose, durable, and reusable. And you can pick these up pretty much anywhere that sells makeup will have these. It doesn't really matter what brand you buy or how much you spend. But I use one of these, and I will use it a few times and then just toss it out when it starts to look dirty or, whatever. You can use these for a variety of different things, and you can wash them. I don't. I just use one a few times and toss it out because they're cheap enough, but you can wash them if you want to. And I know somebody's going to ask me, well, what about the Beauty Blender from Sephora, or what about the Sponge by Sonia Kashuk? Those are basically the same thing as these. I personally have not used those. I've only used this type, but I believe that they are pretty much all the same. I'm sure that those are probably a lot better made because, they are more expensive, so they should be better made. Okay, moving on. Back to powder products. When it comes to setting powder, like the kind that you would use to set your foundation, one option that you have are puffs. I just buy these cheap, inexpensive, compact velour puffs, and you can press the powder on and strategically put as much as you want in different places. It makes it a little bit easier to control how much powder is going and where. I find this a little awkward. I prefer a brush, so I just use a powder brush like I just showed you, the e.l.f. Studio one. And that definitely works best for powders. Now for foundations, I have found through trial and error that this brush, it's wet, so that's why it looks funny. This brush is just a dream for applying my foundation, for placement and blending and everything. This is the Sonia Kashuk flat top brush, and this is just my personal taste. I think this works wonderful. A lot of people are turned off by this brush because it is very difficult to wash. It's extremely dense. The brush hairs are very densely put together, so it is kind of hard to wash, but it's worth the extra effort because your foundation just goes on so beautifully. Now what about eyeshadows? With eyeshadows, I find that sometimes my highlighter looks like a little too much, or it did. So what I have found from trial and error is the MAC 224 brush, believe it or not, works good with my highlighters, because when this is dry, I should have waited, done this another day when the brushes were more dry, but you guys know what this brush normally looks like, okay? It's usually a little bit fluffier than this, and it has sort of a dome shape to it. So what you can do with your highlight eyeshadow is just dab this in, and you won't be picking up that much that way, as opposed to like a shader brush or something like that. So this, I believe, in my opinion, works well for eyeshadow highlight. Crease brushes to blend out your shadows in the crease area. I have found that the Real Techniques brush, Deluxe Crease Brush, that this type of brush works so well. It's very dense, slightly domed, and just, for me, works really well in blending out shadows. I used to use the MAC 224 brush, but because this is so soft and the bristles are thinner and spread further apart, I don't feel as if it works that well for blending, to be honest with you. I know, everybody's got their own opinion, and what works good for some people might be different for other people. I'm just giving you my opinion and what I have found works good for me. And as far as lid application, I like shader brushes. For example, for a powder eyeshadow, I like the MAC 239 brush. I think this just makes it so easy to put shadow on my lid. If I'm working with a cream product, like a MAC Paint Pot, for example, I like the 242 brush, which is basically a shader brush made out of synthetic hair, as opposed to the powder brush is made out of natural hair. And then for anything messy, such as a L'Oreal Infallible eyeshadow, these kind that came out fairly recently that have the little stopper in them, these can be somewhat difficult to work with. So anything, because as you use it, it sort of falls apart. So anything like this, or a MAC pigment, for example, good old-fashioned sponge tip applicators, I find work well with that. Now with pigments, it depends. If you're going for an extremely intense look, then the sponge tip applicator might work well, but if you want something a little bit more toned down, then you might want to go with brushes. So this is my take on applicators, what has worked best for me. Try different things, because you never know. Use your brushes in a way that you've never tried using them before, because sometimes you'll find that brushes that were intended for one thing can actually work fantastic for something else. So if you have a brush in your collection that you've pushed aside because it just wasn't working for you, try it in an unconventional way, and you may find that it has a new use for you. So that's it, you guys. I just wanted to talk a little bit about applicators and their uses, and that's it for today, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.